All right, so Joe Rogan took a bump. Joe Rogan was the front story on one of the dirt sheets I go to, either Mania or Elbow. And he was doing an interview with Aljo. Must be recent. I know he's had Aljo on. I watched that interview, but for them to have just picked up the piece for it to be the headline this morning, he and Aljo must have done another piece. All right. How accurate that is, there's my detective work, but I'm sure that I'm right on that. And Joe is telling Sterling, they're discussing the judging, they're discussing the rules. And Joe tells Sterling, wouldn't it be great if they could look at damage in a round as opposed to control? Because there's times where you could be in complete control. For example, half guard. This is exactly what Joe said. But you could have a guy there for several minutes and not have done anything. Whereas you could get damage in a couple of seconds that should be able to outweigh positional control. Wouldn't that be great if we had done that? So the reason Joe was taking a bump is somebody heard that he said this. They play the clip and then they refresh everybody that the unified rules way back in 2016 changed to that very thing. That damage is to take precedent over control. Now, being aware of that, realizing that's a half a decade ago, realizing that the UFC champion did not know enough to correct the number one voice of the UFC, I got to tell you, I'm with them. I'm with Sterling and Joe, and I'm well aware of what the rule is. I don't know that I fully agree that Joe misspoke and that Sterling himself didn't know the rule. Perhaps they did. Perhaps. But I still somewhat see it in their regard. I really do. Now, look, I'm well aware that the rule says that it's damage over control, but that is extremely speculative. That is very open for interpretation, and how much damage takes precedence over how much control. I don't believe you. I do not believe you how many times you want to tell me that. If somebody's on their feet, boom, they land a straight, boom, they land to the body. Those are the two shots. No one else hits anyone for the rest of the round. That comes out, that's well less than 1/10 of a second for those two shots to happen. The other guy takes him down and absolutely controls him. Does essentially what Sterling did in his last fight to Jan. Takes the back, shows this great control, keeping him down, absolutely frustrated, looking for chokes. None of them land, doesn't soften him up with any punches. The only damage that was done, if we're determining that damage can only be done by strikes. And see, that gets interesting, right? That gets interesting. That would make sense. That the only way that you could do damage is with a strike. That would make sense. If one guy hit the other guy twice in a round, and the other guy hit them 0 times in a round, certainly the damage must have been done by the guy that did. I don't agree. I'm not ready to say yes. I would have to see the round. I have been in wrestling matches on both sides. I have done a lot of damage back in my collegiate days to my opponents. I never hit anybody once. But if I'm being fair, I had a lot of damage done to me in certain rounds of wrestling matches or the matches in entirety. There's no strikes thrown at all. So I don't know that I fully agree. I mean, where are you going to put frustration in the world of damage? It comes back to the lobster example. You got 2 pots of water. One is cold water, one is boiling water. You take the lobster, you put him in the cold water. He doesn't move. You take the lobster, you put him in the boiling water. He fights like hell and he's trying to get out. The lobster has demonstrated a preference to not be in the hot water. I get it. Ding, ding. It made perfect sense. You knew that was going to happen. But he has demonstrated a preference. If you take a guy down and he's trying to get up the entire time, I think Peter Yan would be a fine example. And I'm only going to him because Aljo was talking to Joe and Aljo just fought him and had great control against him. But Yan was not staying down. He was not looking for triangles. He was not looking for arm bars. He was not comfortable on his back. He was not wanting to be in that position. He was not setting up Uma Pilates. He was not setting up Tony Ferguson-style strikes. He was trying to get off the bottom so desperately that he turned his back. He said, to hell with everything if this is what it's going to take. He demonstrated a very clear preference that he did not want to be in that position. So how are you going to rate that? Are you going to tell me that damage can only be done with a strike? And if you are, and I have a feeling that you are, and in all fairness, you would make a very good point. You would make a very strong point. But then I'm going to turn to you and say, where within the unified rules does it say that? It doesn't. It says damage. That's number 1. Followed by control. That's number 2. I still maintain that's open to interpretation. I do. And I think if you think that it has to be strikes and it had to be damage, if one guy landed 2 shots and this guy landed none and it's 2-0 and this is Rose versus Carla all over again, I'm not fully going to disagree with you. I'm just going to say that I have to reserve judgment until I see the specific round. And I do believe damage can be done in other ways than a blow. I've had it done to me. I've done it to people. College wrestling, NCAA, Dan Gable's school of thought. You push and you pull and you pressure, you get his heart beating out of his chest. 5 minutes ago, before you did any of those things to him, he's pounding his chest like King Kong. Now he's over here faking that his shoe's untied. He can't get up and put his foot on the line. That's damage. You have damaged his confidence. You have damaged his game plan. You have damaged his strategy. You have damaged his will. It sounds a little weak when I say it, but I think that you guys hear me as I work through it. Even though it does say damage number 1, it does not specify what that has to come by. And I believe that is a human's conclusion that has to be done through strikes. And I would disagree. I put on grappling matches. I participated in grappling matches. I mean, I will just share with you, there was some very immense amount of damage that can be done with absolutely no strikes. How would you look at Vitor Belfort versus Jon Jones round 1? With the arm bar that's got Jon's arm popping out. We have no way to know. It didn't look comfortable. How would we know? It didn't look like that was good for his ligaments. It didn't look like that was good for his joints. It didn't look like that was good for his bones. It didn't look like that it felt good on his muscles. How do you actually know? It's tough. It's tough, isn't it? I see it the way that Joe sees it. Not to mention Aljo, who's the sitting champion, who just defended his championship through control, not through damage, didn't correct him. He didn't know either. And I don't think it's that both of them were wrong. I don't think it's that both of them missed the memo. That is certainly on the table. Perhaps they deserve a bump. But I'm going to have to get bumped right along with them. And I did know the rule. And I did know it changed in 2016. I do know the order of it. But I don't know where in there you're going to convince me or a jury of our peers that damage has to exclusively be done through strikes. The Lobster showed a preference to be in the cool water as opposed to the hot. Peter Yan showed a preference to want to be on his feet as opposed to down. And I think that many other fighters would go into that same category. I think that it's interesting. I didn't love Joe's example. If you want to know anything that Joe said that I think that he should have been picked on, is for talking about half guard. What the hell good is half guard? Best fighters in the world will tell you, don't pass guard. Stay in guard and pound. Announcers will tell, oh, he's advanced. He's in half guard. He took a jiu-jitsu class. There's not any truth to it. What if he gets all the way to side control? Has he done anything more? No, he hasn't done anything more. That's the part that he should have been given a hard time about. Not for misstating a rule, even if he was wrong. Even if he was wrong, damage followed by control is, I maintain, open to interpretation.